The words left her mouth before she could stop them, carried on the evening wind that stirred the roses climbing the garden wall. I will never marry again, never belong to anyone but myself. This I swear. Gwendolyn Orwell stood alone in the memorial garden, one hand resting on the cold marble bench her late husband's family had commissioned in his memory. The inscription read, "Marcus Whitfield, beloved son and husband," and she felt nothing looking at it except a distant relief that the year of mourning was finally, officially over. No more sympathetic looks from his mother. No more questions about when she would rejoin society properly. No more pretending the marriage had been anything other than a slow erosion of everything she had once been. She was 32 years old and felt ancient, felt like she had lived several lifetimes in the 6 years she had been Marcus's wife, each one smaller than the last. He had never struck her, never even raised his voice. He had simply corrected her, gently, constantly, until she could no longer remember what her own opinions had sounded like, until she dressed the way he preferred, read the books he approved of, laughed at the precise volume he found charming rather than shrill. The cottage she was renting sat at the edge of a sprawling private estate somewhere in the countryside north of London. The landlord's agent had been efficient and distant, the rent reasonable, the solitude exactly what she needed. She had moved here 3 months ago with nothing but her clothes and her late husband's modest life insurance payout, determined to remember who Gwendolyn had been before she became Mrs. Whitfield. "A solemn vow," a voice said from the shadows beneath the oak tree, and Gwendolyn's heart stopped. She whirled, stumbling back against the bench. A man stepped into the fading golden light of sunset, and her breath caught for an entirely different reason. He was the most beautiful and unnerving person she had ever seen. Tall and lean, dressed in dark clothes that looked both modern and somehow timeless. But it was his coloring that made her stare. His skin was pale as moonlight, luminous in the dusk, and his hair fell to his shoulders in a cascade of pure white that shimmered like silk. His eyes, watching her with an expression she could not quite read, were a strange amber color that seemed to catch and hold the dying light. "I apologize for startling you," he continued, his voice low and warm, despite his otherworldly appearance. "I was walking the grounds and heard you speak. I should have made my presence known." "This is private property," Gwendolyn said, though her voice shook slightly. She was alone here, no neighbors within shouting distance, and this stranger looked like something from a Gothic painting. "It is," he agreed, and there was something that might have been amusement in his tone. "My property, actually. I am Alaric Morven. You're renting the gardener's cottage." "Oh," heat flooded her cheeks. "I'm so sorry, I did not realize. The agent never mentioned you might be in residence. I thought the main house was vacant." "It has been, mostly. I travel frequently." He moved closer, and she noticed he walked with an unusual grace, each step perfectly balanced and silent. "But I have returned for a time, and I confess I have been curious about my new tenant. Gwendolyn Orwell, yes?" She nodded, unsure what else to do. He did not offer to shake her hand, which seemed oddly formal, but she was grateful for it. There was something about him that made her skin prickle with awareness, made her feel like prey in the presence of a predator who had not yet decided whether to pounce. "I truly apologize for intruding on what was clearly a private moment," Alaric said, and his voice gentled. "Though I confess I am curious about your vow. Never to wed again seems a rather permanent decision for someone still young." "Young?" she repeated, and laughed without humor. "I feel about 100 years old, Mr. Morven." "Just Alaric, please." He moved to the other end of the bench, waiting until she gave a small nod before sitting. He kept a careful distance between them, she noticed, respectful of her space. "And if I may be so bold, you do not look 100. You look like someone who has been carrying a very heavy weight and has only just set it down." The observation was so accurate, it stole her breath. She sank onto the bench, suddenly exhausted. "My husband died a year ago. Everyone expects me to mourn him properly, to eventually smile bravely and return to the marriage market like a good widow. But I cannot do it. I will not." "Cannot or will not?" Alaric asked, and there was no judgment in the question, only genuine interest. "Both?" She looked at the marble memorial, at the lie carved into stone. "He was not cruel. Everyone will tell you that. He was respectable and appropriate, and he slowly strangled everything that made me myself until I could barely remember my own name without wondering if I was saying it correctly. So no, never again. The silence that followed was surprisingly comfortable. Alaric sat very still beside her, and when she glanced at him, she found him watching the roses rather than her, giving her privacy for her emotion. "Marriage should not be a prison," he said finally. "It should be a partnership freely chosen and freely maintained. What you experienced was not marriage at its best." "Perhaps marriage at its best does not exist," Gwendolyn said. "Perhaps." He stood, fluid as water, and looked down at her with those strange amber eyes. "But I think you are wrong. I think you have simply never seen it." Before she could respond, he inclined his head in a gesture that seemed courtly, old-fashioned. "I will leave you to your peace, Gwendolyn Orwell. But if you have need of anything during your stay here, you need only ask. This estate is yours to explore as you wish. Consider it part of your lease." He walked away into the gathering darkness, and it was only after he disappeared that Gwendolyn realized he had never made a sound. Not his footsteps on the gravel path, not the rustle of his clothes, nothing. She shivered and hurried back to the cottage, locking the door behind her. That night, in the sprawling mansion that crowned the hill above the cottage, Alaric Morven stood at the window of his study and looked down at the small, warm lights glowing in Gwendolyn's windows. He had ruled the vampire territories of Britain for 300 years. He had built empires and torn them down, had survived wars and betrayals and the endless grinding passage of time. He had been worshipped and feared and obeyed without question. And he had just heard a woman vow never to marry again with such conviction that it had struck something deep in his chest, something he had thought long dead. He wanted her. Not to possess, not to own, but to know, to coax back to life. To show that partnership could be joy instead of prison, that belonging to someone could mean being seen and cherished rather than diminished. But he could not pursue her, could not court her, could not even speak his interest aloud. 3 centuries ago, in the first flush of his reign, he had fallen in love with a human woman named Catherine, had pursued her with all the passion and arrogance of youth, had offered her immortality, eternity at his side, everything he thought she could possibly want. She had accepted, and he had turned her, and 3 days after her transformation, she had walked into the sunlight and burned to ash because she could not bear what she had become. The elders, the ancient ones who remembered the old laws, had demanded restitution, not his life or his crown, but something that cut deeper, a blood oath of celibacy, sworn on his honor and sealed with his own blood. He could not take a lover, could not marry, could not pursue physical intimacy of any kind until the elders released him from the vow or 300 years past, whichever came first. The 300 years had ended 2 months ago, but the elders had not released him, and his honor would not allow him to simply ignore the oath. He had caused Catherine's death through his arrogance and his failure to truly understand what he was asking of her. He owed the debt. But standing here now, watching Gwendolyn's lights and remembering the way her voice had shaken when she swore never to wed again, Alaric felt something shift in his chest, a determination settling into place. He would not pursue her, would not seduce her or pressure her or use his considerable power to sway her affections. But he could be her friend, could show her, gently and without expectation, what partnership could look like, could change not her vow but what she believed marriage might mean, so that if she ever chose to wed again, it would be with joy rather than resignation. And perhaps if the stars aligned and the elders could be satisfied, if he could find a way to honorably discharge his debt, then someday he might tell her the truth of what he felt. It was a patient game, and patience was something he had in abundance. He smiled alone in the darkness and began to plan. Gwendolyn woke to find a basket on her doorstep. Inside were fresh bread, butter, honey, and a small bouquet of the white roses that grew wild on the estate's southern wall. A note in elegant handwriting read, "Welcome properly to the grounds. The roses bloom best in adversity. I thought you might appreciate them." A she stood in her doorway, barefoot and wrapped in her dressing gown, and felt something warm and unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Not quite trust, not yet, but something softer than the armor she had worn for so long. Over the following weeks, she saw Alaric rarely, but felt his presence constantly. The library in the main house was opened for her use, and she found herself spending long afternoons there, curled in a window seat with books about art history and philosophy that she had always wanted to read, but Marcus had considered frivolous. The gardens were always pristine, and she never encountered workers, but she suspected Alaric arranged for them to come when she was away. When they did meet, it was always by apparent accident and always brief. He would be walking the grounds at dusk and she would be returning from the village. He would be in the library selecting a book when she arrived and would stay only long enough for a brief conversation about what she was reading before excusing himself. He never touched her, never stood too close, never lingered beyond what was comfortable. And he asked her questions, real questions, about what she thought and felt and wanted. He asked about her childhood, about the small accounting business she had run before Marcus convinced her to close it because it was not appropriate for his wife to work. He asked about her parents, dead now for 10 years, and listened with genuine attention when she told stories about her mother's terrible cooking and her father's worst jokes. "You loved them," Alaric observed one evening. They were walking the edge of the estate where the woods began, and the last light was fading from the sky. "Desperately," Gwendolyn said. "They were not perfect, but they were kind. And they saw me. Really saw me, every messy, complicated bit." "That is what love should be," Alaric said quietly. "Seeing someone truly and choosing them anyway, choosing them because of who they are, not despite it." She looked at him, at his profile in the fading light. He was always so pale, so still. She had never seen him during full daylight, she realized, always dusk or evening or the rare overcast afternoon. "Are you ill?" she asked impulsively. "I do not mean to pry, but you are so pale, and I have never seen you in the sun." He stopped walking and turned to face her. For a moment something flickered in his amber eyes, something that might have been pain or regret, or simply exhaustion. "I have a condition," he said carefully. "The sunlight is dangerous for me, fatal if I am exposed too long. I have learned to live with it, but it requires certain accommodations." "I'm sorry," Gwendolyn said, and meant it. "That must be terribly isolating." "It can be," he agreed, "but I have learned that isolation is a choice as much as a circumstance. I have friends, allies, people I trust. I have learned to find joy in the darkness rather than mourning the light." They resumed walking, and Gwendolyn found herself thinking about his words long after they parted ways. Find joy in the darkness. It felt like advice meant for her as much as a description of his own life. 2 months into her tenancy, Gwendolyn received a letter from Marcus's mother. It was poison, dressed in politeness, asking when Gwendolyn intended to vacate the cottage, because surely she had imposed on Mr. Morven's generosity long enough. And perhaps it was time she stopped hiding in the countryside and faced her responsibilities to Marcus's memory. Gwendolyn sat at her small kitchen table and stared at the letter until the words blurred. The old shame tried to rise up, the voice in her head that sounded like Marcus telling her that his mother was right, that she was selfish and ungrateful and difficult. A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Alaric standing there, and the concern on his face was immediate. "What happened?" he asked. "Nothing," she said automatically, then caught herself. "No, I'm sorry. That is not true. I received an unpleasant letter, but it is nothing you need to concern yourself with." "May I come in?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered her small cottage, and it felt suddenly smaller, his presence too large for the space, but not threatening, never threatening. She handed him the letter wordlessly. He read it, and his expression went carefully blank. "This woman believes she has power over you," he said finally. "She does not. She was my mother-in-law. She thinks I owe her. You owe her nothing." Alaric's voice was soft but utterly certain. "You fulfilled your obligations to her son while he lived. His death does not grant her ownership of your future." "She will make things difficult if I ignore her," Gwendolyn said. "She has connections, social influence. She could make me unwelcome in certain circles." "What circles?" Alaric asked. "The ones that already failed you? The ones that told you to smile and endure while your husband slowly erased you?" He set the letter down on the table with careful precision. "Forgive me. I am overstepping. This is your battle, not mine." "No," Gwendolyn said, surprised by her own vehemence. "You're right. I have been so afraid of what people will think, of being judged or shunned, That I have let them continue to control me even after Marcus's death. I'm so tired of being afraid." "Then stop," Alaric said simply. "You live here now. You are under my protection if you will accept it. No one will trouble you on these grounds, and if his mother wishes to turn some social circle against you, let her. Those people are not worthy of your time." "Your protection," Gwendolyn repeated. She should have felt offended, perhaps, or at least wary of what he might want in return, but instead, she felt only relief, warm and dizzying. "Why would you offer me that?" Alaric was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and sincere. "Because I have come to value your friendship. Because I think you deserve to be free of people who diminish you. And because I would like to see what you become when you are no longer afraid." The words hung in the air between them, and Gwendolyn felt something crack open in her chest. Not attraction, not yet, though she could not deny he was beautiful in his strange, otherworldly way, but something deeper. Trust, maybe, or the beginning of it. "Thank you," she whispered. He inclined his head and moved toward the door, then paused. "Gwendolyn, if you would like, I could write to her on your behalf. As your landlord, I have every right to tell her that you are welcome here as long as you wish to stay. It might carry more weight than a letter from you alone. Would you?" The relief was immediate and overwhelming. "Consider it done." He smiled, and it transformed his face from beautiful to something almost human, warm and genuine. "Rest well. Tomorrow the gardens will still be here, and so will you, and that Harridan will be many miles away with no power over either." After he left, Gwendolyn sat in her small kitchen and cried. Not from sadness, but from relief, from the sheer overwhelming sensation of being defended instead of diminished, supported instead of controlled. She did not know what Alaric was, not really. Did not understand his strange appearance or his avoidance of daylight or the way he moved too quietly and spoke with a formality that seemed to belong to another century. But she knew he was kind, knew he saw her as a person rather than a problem to be managed, and that, for now, was enough. Alaric kept his word. The letter he sent to Marcus's mother was a masterpiece of polite brutality, informing her that Mrs. Orwell was a valued tenant on his private estate, that her lease was indefinite and at his personal invitation, and that any further correspondence attempting to harass or intimidate her would be considered a legal matter. He had it delivered by a lawyer in London, just to underscore the point. Gwendolyn heard nothing further from the Whitfield family. As spring turned to summer, she began to bloom. She reopened her accounting business working from the cottage and was surprised by how quickly her old clients returned. She'd been good at her work, and apparently her absence had been felt. Marcus had convinced her that no one would want to hire a woman for such things, but Marcus had been wrong about many things. She and Alaric fell into a rhythm. He would appear in the evenings, and they would walk the grounds together, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his travels, about cities she had never seen, and art she had only read about. She told him about the small pleasures she was rediscovering, baking bread without worrying if it was too plain, reading novels Marcus had dismissed as lowbrow, wearing comfortable clothes instead of the restrictive fashionable things he had preferred. "You're coming back to life," Alaric observed one evening. They were sitting in the library, a chessboard between them. He was teaching her to play, and she was discovering she had a talent for strategy. "I feel like I am," Gwendolyn admitted. She moved her bishop, a bold choice that made him raise his eyebrows. "It is strange. I thought I would mourn Marcus more than I do. I feel guilty for not missing him." "Do not," Alaric said. He studied the board, then made his own move. "You are mourning what you thought the marriage would be. The loss of those hopes is worth grieving, but the man himself was not kind to you, Gwendolyn. You do not owe him eternal sorrow." "Everyone thinks I should be more broken," she confessed. "His friends, his family. They look at me like I am cold." "You are not cold. You are honest." He captured her knight, but she had expected that, had already planned 3 moves ahead. "I find it refreshing." She made her next move and said quietly, "Check." Alaric laughed, surprised and delighted. "Well played. You're learning quickly." "I have a good teacher." Their eyes met across the board, and something shifted. The air felt heavier, charged with possibility. Gwendolyn's breath caught, and she saw something flicker in Alaric's expression before he looked away. "It is late," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "I should let you rest." He left quickly, and Gwendolyn sat alone in the library, her heart pounding. She was beginning to understand what she felt when she looked at him, beginning to recognize the warmth in her chest when he smiled, the way she found herself listening for his footsteps in the evening, the disappointment on the rare nights when he did not appear. She was falling for him. For this strange, kind man who treated her like an equal, who made her laugh, who saw her and valued what he saw, and she had sworn never to marry again. The thought should have brought panic. Instead, it brought clarity. She had sworn never to wed again because she believed marriage meant losing herself. But what if it did not have to mean that? What if Alaric was right and marriage could be partnership instead of prison? She was not ready yet, was not ready to trust that much, to risk that much. But for the first time in years, she could imagine wanting to be ready someday. Alaric, meanwhile, was losing his mind. He sat in his study, staring at the chessboard he had brought back with him, at the position of the pieces when he had fled the library. She had nearly beaten him. This human woman with no supernatural advantages, no centuries of experience, had nearly checkmated him through sheer intelligence and creativity. And when their eyes had met, he had wanted so desperately to lean across the board and kiss her that he had nearly broken his oath right there. 300 years. 300 years of celibacy, of denying himself physical intimacy of any kind, and it had never been difficult until now. He had not wanted anyone, not really, had told himself he was content alone, but Gwendolyn made him want, made him ache with it, not just physical desire, though there was that, hot and fierce in his veins, but emotional hunger, the need to be close to her, to be trusted by her, to build something real and lasting. He could not continue like this, could not keep pretending he was simply a friend when his feelings were becoming dangerously close to love. He needed to speak to the elders, needed to face the council and argue for his release from the oath, but the thought of it made him ill. The council would demand he account for Catherine's death, would make him relive his failure. And they might refuse, might decide he had not learned enough, suffered enough, changed enough. But if he did not try, he would lose Gwendolyn anyway. Would watch her heal and grow and eventually leave, would never have the chance to tell her what she had come to mean to him. The next evening, he did not come to the cottage, or the evening after that. Gwendolyn tried not to let it sting, tried to tell herself he had his own life, his own concerns. But by the third evening, she was worried, and by the fourth she marched up to the main house and knocked on the door. A butler answered, a thin man with the same pale coloring as Alaric. He looked surprised to see her. "I need to speak with Mr. Morven," Gwendolyn said firmly. "The master is not receiving visitors," the butler said. "I am not a visitor. I am his tenant and his friend, and I need to know he is well, please." The butler hesitated, then stepped aside. "Wait in the drawing room." She had never been inside the main house before. It was beautiful and strange, decorated in a mix of modern and antique that should have clashed but somehow worked. Everything was dark wood and rich fabrics, lit by soft lamps that cast warm pools of light. Alaric appeared after several minutes, and Gwendolyn's breath caught. He looked drawn, tired in a way she had never seen him. His white hair was tied back loosely, and he had shadows under his amber eyes. "Gwendolyn," he said, and there was something raw in his voice. "You should not be here." "You have been avoiding me," she said. "I wanted to make sure you were all right." "I am not," he said simply. He moved to the window, keeping his back to her. "I am being a coward, and I apologize. You deserve better." "What are you afraid of?" she asked gently. He laughed, a bitter sound. "Everything. Failure, rejection, losing what little I have gained." She crossed the room to stand beside him, not touching, but close. "Alaric, whatever this is, you can tell me. I thought we were friends." "We are," he said. He turned to face her, and the emotion in his eyes made her heart stutter. "But I want more than friendship, Gwendolyn. I want to court you properly. I want the right to call on you, to take you to dinners and shows, to learn everything about you. I want to earn your trust and perhaps someday your affection, but I cannot." The words hung between them. Gwendolyn's mind was reeling. He wanted to court her. This beautiful, strange, kind man wanted her. "Why can't you?" she whispered. Alaric closed his eyes. Because I am bound by an oath, a promise I made 300 years ago, and I cannot break it without dishonoring everything I am." 300 years, Gwendolyn repeated. The words did not make sense. Could not make sense. "I'm a vampire," Alaric said quietly. "I have lived for centuries. I rule the vampire territories of this island, and I am bound by a blood oath of celibacy that I swore as restitution for a terrible mistake." Gwendolyn should have run, should have been terrified. But instead, things began clicking into place. His pale skin, his white hair, his amber eyes, the way he only appeared at night, his old-fashioned manners, and the way he sometimes spoke like someone from another century. "A vampire," she said slowly. "Yes." He opened his eyes, and there was such vulnerability in his gaze that it hurt to see. "I understand if you wish to leave, if you want nothing more to do with me. I should have told you sooner, but I was selfish. I wanted these months with you, wanted to pretend I could be normal for just a little while." "Is anyone else here a vampire?" Gwendolyn asked. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant and calm. "My butler, Hadrian, and several of the groundskeepers. They work at night, which is why you have never seen them." "Will you hurt me?" "Never," Alaric said, and the word was fierce, absolute. "I would destroy anyone who tried to harm you, including myself if I ever lost control. But I would never hurt you, Gwendolyn. That is the one thing I can promise with absolute certainty." She believed him. She should not have, but she did. Because in the months she had known him, he had never been anything but gentle, respectful, kind, had never pushed or demanded or tried to take more than she was willing to give. "Tell me about the oath," she said. So he did. He told her about Catherine, about his arrogance and his failure to understand what he was asking of her when he offered immortality, about her death and his grief and the elders' demand for restitution, about 300 years alone, unable to touch or be touched, learning patience and humility and the true cost of his actions. "The time limit has passed," he said, "but the elders have not released me. I believe they want me to come before them, to face the council and prove I have learned from my mistakes. But I am afraid." "Of what?" Gwendolyn asked. "That they will say no, that they will decide I am still not worthy, that I will lose any chance to be with you because I was not good enough 300 years ago, and I am not good enough now." Gwendolyn's chest ached. She thought about her vow in the garden, about how certain she had been that she would never marry again. And here was this man, this vampire, who had spent 3 centuries alone because of one terrible mistake, who was afraid to even ask for his freedom because he thought he did not deserve it. "You have to go before the council," she said firmly. "You have to at least try. And if they refuse, then we will deal with that when it happens. But Alaric, you cannot spend the rest of your life punishing yourself. You made a mistake, a terrible one, yes, but you have paid for it. 300 years of loneliness is enough." He stared at her. "You are not running. You should be running. Why? Because you are a vampire. You have been nothing but kind to me. You have helped me remember who I am, helped me find my strength again. The fact that you are not human does not change any of that." "You swore never to wed again," he said quietly. "I did." She took a breath, feeling her way through the words. "But I swore that because I believed marriage meant losing myself. You have shown me it does not have to be that way. I am not ready yet, Alaric. I am not ready to promise you anything, but I would like the chance to see where this could go, if the elders will release you, if you are willing to be patient with me." Something blazed in his eyes, bright and fierce and hopeful. "I have waited 300 years. I can wait as long as you need." "Then go to the council," Gwendolyn said. "Fight for this, for us, whatever we might become." Alaric reached out slowly, giving her time to step back. When she did not, he took her hand in his. His skin was cool and smooth, and she felt the barest tremor in his fingers. "I will go," he said. "I will face them, and I will do everything in my power to come back to you free." The Council of Elders met in a hidden chamber beneath London, in vaults that had existed since before the city above had been anything more than a Roman settlement. Alaric descended the ancient stone steps with Hadrian at his side, his butler and oldest friend, and tried to calm the fear coiling in his chest. "You do not have to do this alone," Hadrian said quietly. "I can speak on your behalf." "No," Alaric said. This is my debt to settle, my mistake to answer for." The council chamber was round, lit by torches that burned with cold blue flame. 7 elders sat in a semicircle, ancient vampires who had walked the earth for 1,000 years or more. Alaric had not seen most of them since the day they imposed his oath, and looking at them now, he was struck by how little they had changed. Vampires did not age, but these ones seemed to exist outside of time entirely, their faces carved from marble, their eyes holding centuries of judgment. "Alaric Morven," the eldest said. Her name was Seraphina, and she had been ancient when Rome fell. "You come before us after 3 centuries? Do you seek release from your oath?" "I do," Alaric said. He kept his voice steady, though his hands wanted to shake. "The time specified is past. I have fulfilled the terms of the punishment." "The time was not a guarantee of release," another elder said. His name was Constantine, and his voice was like gravel. "It was a minimum. We may choose to extend it if we feel you have not learned from your failure." "Then ask me," Alaric said. "Question me, test me. But I have spent 300 years alone, thinking about my mistakes. I know now what I did wrong. I know what I took from Catherine, and I know I can never make amends to her. But I can do better. I can be better, and I am asking you to let me try." "Tell us," Seraphina said. "What did you learn?" Alaric took a breath. This was the moment he had been dreading, but there was no way around it. Only through. "I learned that love is not ownership," he said. "When I offered Catherine immortality, I thought I was giving her a gift. But I never asked what she wanted, never considered that she might not want eternity, might not want to become what I am. I saw her as something to be won, to be kept, rather than as a person with her own desires and fears. And when she could not bear what I had made her into, when she chose to end her existence rather than live as a vampire, I was angry at first, felt betrayed. But the betrayal was mine, not hers. I betrayed her trust. I remade her without truly understanding the cost." "And now," Constantine asked, "if you were released from this oath, what would you do differently?" "I would listen," Alaric said simply. "I would ask instead of assuming. I would build partnership instead of possession. There is a woman I care for, deeply. She is human. And if the day ever came that we discussed her turning, I would make certain she understood every consequence, every loss, every change. I would give her time to decide, and I would accept her choice whether it was yes or no. Because loving someone means honoring who they are, not trying to remake them into what you want them to be." The elders were silent. Alaric waited, his heart beating too fast, his hands clenched at his sides. "You speak of a human woman," Seraphina said. "You would court her if we released you." "I would ask permission to court her," Alaric corrected. "Whether she accepts is her choice." "And if she chooses not to turn? If she remains human and ages and dies while you remain unchanged?" The question hurt, but Alaric had already faced this possibility during his long nights alone. "Then I will love her for the time we have. I will not pressure her to become something she is not. And when she is gone, I will mourn her and be grateful for whatever time we shared." Another elder spoke, a woman named Isolde, whose face was sharp and cold. "Pretty words, but words are easy. How do we know you will not repeat your mistake? How do we know you have truly changed?" "You do not," Alaric said. "You cannot know with certainty. But I have ruled these territories for 300 years. I have been fair and just. I have protected my people and honored the old laws. I have tried to be worthy of the second chance Catherine's death cost. I cannot prove my heart to you, but I can offer my history as evidence." The elders conferred in a language so old Alaric barely recognized it. He waited, standing alone in the center of the chamber, and thought of Gwendolyn, of her smile, her strength, the way she had looked at him when he confessed what he was and had not run. Finally, Seraphina spoke. "We have decided. Alaric Morven, we find that you have served your time with honor, that you have learned humility and wisdom from your failure. But release from a blood oath requires more than time served. It requires restitution." Alaric's heart sank. "What restitution? I cannot bring Catherine back." "No," Seraphina agreed. "But you can honor her memory. You will establish a sanctuary for newly turned vampires, a place where they can learn what they have become and decide, with full knowledge and support, whether they wish to continue their existence. You will fund it, staff it, and oversee it personally. This is the price of your freedom." Relief flooded through him, so intense it nearly brought him to his knees. "I accept. Gladly. I will begin immediately." "Then we release you from your oath," Seraphina said. She stood, ancient and terrible and beautiful, and made a gesture in the air. Alaric felt something break inside him, a chain he had carried so long he had stopped noticing its weight. "Go, Alaric Morven, honor Catherine's memory, and do not make us regret our mercy." Alaric left the chamber with his head high and his heart pounding. Hadrian was waiting at the top of the stairs, and the old vampire's face split into a rare smile when he saw Alaric's expression. "They released you," Hadrian said. "They did, with conditions, but I would have agreed to anything." Alaric took a breath, feeling like he could breathe properly for the first time in centuries. "I need to go to her. I need to tell her." "Then go," Hadrian said. "I will begin the preparations for the sanctuary. You have a woman to court." Gwendolyn was in the garden when Alaric found her, the same garden where he had first heard her vow, where this had all begun. She was tending the roses, her hands careful on the thorny stems, and she looked up when she heard his approach. "You are back," she said, and he could hear the relief in her voice. "I was worried." "I am back," he confirmed. He moved closer, close enough to see the flush in her cheeks, the hope in her eyes. "The council released me. I am free, Gwendolyn, free to court you if you will allow it." The smile that broke across her face was like sunrise, bright and warm and beautiful. "I will allow it, gladly." "There are conditions," he said quickly. "I must establish a sanctuary for new vampires, a place to help them adjust. It will take time and resources, and I need you to understand what you would be accepting. I am a vampire, Gwendolyn. I will not age. I will outlive you by centuries unless you choose to turn, and I will never ask that of you. Our time together will be brief by my measure. Are you certain this is what you want?" She set down her gardening shears and crossed to him, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. Her touch was warm, alive, precious beyond measure. "I spent 6 years in a marriage where I was not seen, not valued, not allowed to be myself," she said. "I would rather have 10 years of real partnership, real love, than 1,000 years of being someone's possession. So yes, Alaric, I am certain. Court me. Let us see what we can build together." He leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and when she did not, he kissed her. It was gentle and careful, and tasted like hope, like freedom, like the beginning of something precious. Her hands slid into his hair, and she kissed him back, and Alaric felt 300 years of loneliness finally come to an end. The courtship was slow and deliberate and joyful. Alaric took Gwendolyn to London, to galleries and shows and restaurants she had never been allowed to visit when Marcus was alive. They walked along the Thames at midnight, when the city was quiet, and he could move freely without fear of the sun. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing, building the foundation of real partnership. He introduced her to his world carefully, to Hadrian and the other vampires in his household, who treated her with cautious respect, and then, gradually, genuine warmth. To the work of managing the vampire territories, the delicate balance of keeping their existence secret while maintaining order among his kind. Gwendolyn, in turn, showed him her world, took him to the small village where she had grown up, introduced him to her few close friends who had survived the years of Marcus's influence, showed him her accounting work, and was surprised and touched when he asked intelligent questions and seemed genuinely interested. They were careful with each other, always. Alaric never pushed, never assumed, always asked before taking her hand or pulling her close. Gwendolyn, learning to trust again, found herself reaching for him more and more often, found safety in his presence rather than threat. 6 months into their courtship, Alaric began work on the sanctuary. It was built on the grounds of the estate, a beautiful modern building tucked into the woods where new vampires could come to learn what they had become in safety. He hired counselors, both vampire and human, and established protocols for helping newly turned vampires understand their choices. "You're doing this for Catherine," Gwendolyn said one evening. They were touring the nearly finished building, and she could see the care that had gone into every detail. "I am," Alaric agreed. I cannot bring her back or undo what I did, but I can try to make sure no one else suffers the way she did, that every new vampire has the support and information to make real choices about their existence." "She would appreciate this," Gwendolyn said softly. "I think she would forgive you if she could." "Perhaps." Alaric took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "But I have forgiven myself finally. And that matters more." The seasons turned. Summer faded to autumn, autumn to winter. Gwendolyn's business flourished. Alaric's sanctuary opened and began serving its first residents, lost souls trying to navigate their new existence. And through it all, their relationship deepened. They had their first real argument over something trivial, a disagreement about how to handle a difficult client of Gwendolyn's. It was not the topic that mattered, but what came after. Alaric did not shut down or grow cold. He listened, acknowledged her point, explained his own perspective. They talked it through like partners, like equals, and came to a compromise that satisfied them both. Afterward, Gwendolyn sat in her cottage and cried, because this was what she had needed from Marcus and never received, the ability to disagree and still be respected, to have her opinions valued even when they differed from his. Alaric found her crying and gathered her close, holding her while she explained. "I'm so angry at him," she whispered against Alaric's chest, "at Marcus, for wasting 6 years of my life, for making me believe I was not worth listening to." "Your anger is valid," Alaric said quietly. "He took from you. That is worth grieving and being angry about. But Gwendolyn, those 6 years were not wasted. You survived them. You learned from them. You know now what you will not accept, what you need in a partnership. That knowledge has value, even if it was hard-won." She pulled back to look at him. "How did you become so wise?" 300 years alone gives one a great deal of time to think," he said dryly, "and to make mistakes and learn from them." Winter deepened. On a cold December evening, Alaric brought Gwendolyn to the garden where they had first met. It had been transformed, strung with lights that glowed soft and warm in the darkness. A small table was set with a meal he had prepared himself, simple but elegant. "What is this?" Gwendolyn asked, delighted. "A year ago I heard you make a vow," Alaric said. He pulled out her chair, waited until she sat before taking his own seat across from her. "You swore never to wed again, and I swore silently to change your heart, not to break your vow, but to show you that marriage could be different than what you had known." Gwendolyn's breath caught. "Alaric, I am not proposing," he said quickly. "Not yet. You are not ready, and I would never rush you. But I wanted you to know that I have been thinking about the future, about what I want from this life, from whatever time we have. And what I want is you, Gwendolyn. I want partnership with you. I want to build something together that honors both of us, that makes us both stronger rather than diminishing either of us. I want to hear you laugh and hold you when you cry and argue with you about trivial things and support you in everything that matters." Tears were streaming down her face now, but she was smiling. "I want that too. All of it." "Then when you are ready," Alaric said softly, "we touch you. When you have had enough time to be certain, I will ask you properly, and I hope you will say yes." "I hope I will too," Gwendolyn whispered. They ate dinner under the stars, talking and laughing, and when the meal was finished, Alaric took her hand and led her to the center of the garden. Music drifted from hidden speakers, something slow and sweet, and he pulled her into his arms. They danced in the garden, vampire and human, moving together like they had been partners for lifetimes instead of months. And Gwendolyn felt the last of her fear finally release its grip on her heart. She could love again, could trust again, could build something new without losing herself. Spring came, and with it, Gwendolyn's 33rd birthday. Alaric planned a small party, just the two of them and Hadrian, and a few of Gwendolyn's friends from the village. It was informal and warm, and nothing like the stiff social events Marcus had dragged her to, and she loved every moment. At the end of the evening, when everyone else had left, Alaric took her hand and led her back to the garden. The roses were beginning to bloom, filling the air with their scent. "I have a question to ask you," Alaric said. He sank to one knee with a grace that made her heart stutter and pulled a ring from his pocket. It was simple and beautiful, a single emerald set in silver, old-fashioned and perfect. "Gwendolyn Orwell," he said, and his voice shook slightly with emotion. You have taught me that love is not possession, but partnership. That strength comes from honoring each other rather than controlling each other. You have shown me joy after centuries of loneliness, and you have given me hope for the future. I know you swore never to wed again, and I am asking you to break that vow. Not because I want to own you or change you, but because I want to stand beside you as your partner and your husband. Will you marry me?" Gwendolyn looked down at this beautiful, powerful, ancient being kneeling before her, offering her everything she had thought she would never want again. And she realized her vow had already been broken, shattered the moment she allowed herself to trust him, because she had not sworn never to love again, only never to marry. And she loved him, desperately and completely, loved him enough to believe that marriage could be different this time. "Yes," she said, and her voice rang clear and certain in the night air. "Yes, I will marry you." Alaric stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he was kissing her, holding her close, and she could feel him trembling with joy and relief. "I was so afraid you would say no," he admitted against her hair. "I was afraid I would want to say yes," Gwendolyn confessed. "I was afraid to trust this much again. But you have earned it, Alaric. Every day, in every way, you have shown me what partnership can be. I trust you. I love you. And I want to spend whatever time we have building a life together." They planned the wedding for midsummer, on the longest day of the year. Not a traditional ceremony, but something that felt true to who they were. They would be hand-fasted in the garden at dusk, when Alaric could be present safely, with only their closest friends as witnesses. Gwendolyn wrote her own vows, sitting at her kitchen table with tears streaming down her face as she thought about how far she had come. From the broken woman who had sworn never to wed again to this version of herself, whole and happy and ready to commit to partnership. The day of the wedding arrived, clear and warm. Gwendolyn dressed simply, in a flowing dress the color of cream, with roses from the garden woven into her hair. She had no family left to give her away, but Hadrian offered to escort her, and she accepted gratefully. The old vampire had become a friend, someone she trusted and valued. "He is very happy," Hadrian told her as they walked toward the garden. "I have known Alaric for 200 years, and I have never seen him like this. You are good for him." "He is good for me too," Gwendolyn said. The garden had been transformed with flowers and candles, and a small circle of chairs held their guests. Alaric stood in the center, dressed in dark formal clothes that made him look every inch the vampire king he was. His white hair gleamed in the fading light, and his amber eyes found hers immediately. She walked to him, and when Hadrian placed her hand in Alaric's, she felt complete. They had chosen a friend of Gwendolyn's, a retired vicar from the village, to officiate. He was human and knew nothing of vampires, but he knew about love and partnership, and that was enough. "We are gathered here," the vicar began, "to witness the handfasting of Gwendolyn Orwell and Alaric Morven. They have chosen to write their own vows, to speak their promises in their own words." Alaric went first. He took both her hands in his, and his voice was steady and warm. "Gwendolyn, I vow to honor you as you are, not as I wish you to be. I vow to listen when you speak and to value your thoughts and opinions. I vow to support your dreams and to stand beside you in difficulty. I vow to never diminish you or control you, to build partnership instead of possession. I vow to love you for all the days we have, whether they number in decades or centuries. You have given me hope and joy after lifetimes of loneliness, and I will spend the rest of my existence trying to be worthy of that gift." Gwendolyn was crying now, but they were happy tears. She squeezed his hands and took a breath. "Alaric, I vow to trust you with my whole heart. I vow to be honest even when it is difficult, to share my fears and my joys. I vow to build a life with you as an equal partner, to honor the strength you offer without losing my own. I vow to accept you as you are, vampire and man, king and partner. You have shown me that love does not have to mean losing myself, that I can be fully myself and fully yours. I vow to love you for whatever time we have and to be grateful for every moment." The vicar bound their hands together with a length of silk, the traditional symbol of hand-fasting. "By these vows and in the presence of these witnesses, I declare you bound to each other in partnership and love. You may seal your promises with a kiss." Alaric cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, gentle and deep and full of promise. Their friends cheered, and Gwendolyn laughed against his mouth, giddy with joy. The celebration that followed was small and perfect. They ate and drank and danced under the stars, vampire and human, mixing together in easy companionship. Gwendolyn looked around at the faces of the people she loved, at Alaric laughing with Hadrian, at her friends from the village chatting comfortably with the vampires from the household, and felt a contentment so deep it ached. She had thought she would never marry again, had believed partnership meant prison, love meant loss of self. But Alaric had shown her a different way, had proved that two people could come together and both be strengthened by it. When the celebration finally wound down and the last guests departed, Alaric swept her into his arms and carried her back to the main house. She had officially moved in 2 weeks ago, merging her life with his, and her belongings were scattered comfortably among his now. He set her down in their bedroom, and she turned to face him in the soft lamplight. "Hello, husband," she said, testing out the word. "Hello, wife," he replied and pulled her close. "Are you happy?" "Deliriously," Gwendolyn said. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the slow, steady beat of his heart. "I never thought I could be this happy again." "Neither did I," Alaric admitted. "I had resigned myself to eternal solitude, and then I heard you make your vow, and I knew I had to try, had to show you what partnership could be." "You succeeded," she said softly. "You changed my heart, Alaric. You made me believe again." They stood together in the quiet, holding each other, two souls who had found their way through loneliness and loss to this moment of peace. "I should tell you," Alaric said after a while, his voice slightly hesitant. "The transformation. If you ever wanted it. It would be your choice entirely, and I would support whatever you decided. But if you chose to turn, we could have centuries together instead of decades." Gwendolyn pulled back to look at him. "I have thought about it," she admitted, "but I'm not ready to decide yet. Is that all right?" "More than all right," he assured her. "This is not a decision to be rushed, and whatever you choose, I will be content. I would rather have 40 human years with you than an eternity with someone who regretted her choice." "I love you," she said. "I love you too," he replied. The years that followed were full and rich. Gwendolyn's business continued to grow, and she became known as one of the best accountants in the region. Alaric's sanctuary flourished, helping dozens of newly turned vampires adjust to their new existence. They traveled together, Alaric showing her the world he had known for centuries, Gwendolyn showing him how to see it fresh through her eyes. They had their difficult moments, of course, disagreements and frustrations and the occasional argument, but they had learned to navigate conflict together, to listen and compromise, and come through stronger. 5 years into their marriage, on a quiet evening in the garden, Gwendolyn brought up the question of turning again. "I think I am ready to discuss it seriously," she said. They were sitting on the bench, her head on his shoulder, watching the stars. Alaric tensed slightly. "All right. What do you want to know?" "Everything. Every detail, every consequence. What I would lose and what I would gain." So he told her. About the transformation process itself, painful and difficult, about the thirst for blood and how to manage it, about the loss of sunlight, the way the world looked different through vampire eyes, about immortality, the weight of watching the world change while you stayed the same. "You would outlive everyone you know now," he said quietly. "Your friends from the village, anyone you care about who remains human. That is a terrible price to pay. But I would have you," Gwendolyn said. "I would have time to do everything I have ever dreamed of. I could travel, learn languages, study art. I could see centuries of change." "You could," Alaric agreed. "But Gwendolyn, I need you to understand. This is not a decision you can unmake. If you turn and regret it, I cannot give you back your humanity. I need to know you are choosing this freely, without pressure, because it is what you truly want." She sat up to face him. "I am not Catherine. I know what I would be accepting. And yes, Alaric, I want this. I want centuries with you. I want to build something that lasts. I want to see where the world goes and be at your side while we watch it together." "Are you certain?" His voice shook slightly. "Absolutely certain?" "I am," she said firmly. "Turn me. Alaric, make me your partner in every way." The transformation was agony. 3 days of fever and pain, her body dying and remaking itself. Alaric stayed with her every moment, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, doing everything he could to ease her suffering. When she finally woke on the 4th day, the world looked different. Colors were brighter, sounds sharper. She could hear Alaric's heartbeat from across the room, could smell the roses in the garden through closed windows. And she was hungry, desperately hungry, in a way she had never experienced as a human. "I know," Alaric said, appearing beside her with a glass of dark liquid. "Drink this. It will help." She drank and the hunger eased. The blood tasted like life, rich and warm, and she understood now why vampires craved it. "How do you feel?" Alaric asked, watching her carefully. Gwendolyn took stock. The pain was gone. She felt strong, powerful, alive in a way she never had before. And looking at Alaric, at her husband, she felt nothing but certainty. "I feel perfect," she said. "I feel like I made the right choice." The relief on his face was profound. "I was so afraid you would regret it, that you would walk into the sun like Catherine did." "I am not Catherine," Gwendolyn said gently. She crossed to him and took his hands. "I chose this knowingly, gladly. I wanted this life with you, and I have no regrets." Learning to be a vampire was challenging but rewarding. Alaric taught her everything, patient and thorough. How to feed without killing, how to move with vampire speed and grace, how to navigate the political complexities of their world. She attended her first council meeting at his side, and the elders who had released him from his oath looked at her with assessment and eventually approval. "You chose well," Serafina told Alaric after the meeting. "She is strong." "She was always strong," Alaric replied. "I simply gave her immortality to match." They returned to the estate, to the garden that had witnessed so many important moments in their relationship. It was autumn again, the roses fading, leaves turning gold and red. "Do you miss it?" Alaric asked. "The sunlight?" Gwendolyn considered. She did miss it, the warmth on her skin, the simple pleasure of a sunny afternoon. But she had known the cost, had chosen to pay it. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But I have you and I have time, and I have a future I can build on my own terms. That is worth more than sunlight." They stood together in the gathering dusk, vampire king and vampire queen, partners in every sense of the word. The estate stretched out around them, peaceful and beautiful. The sanctuary hummed with life, helping lost souls find their way. And in the cottage where Gwendolyn had once lived alone, a new tenant was moving in, a young woman escaping her own difficult past. "We should introduce ourselves," Gwendolyn said, nodding toward the cottage. "Make sure she knows she is welcome here." "Tomorrow," Alaric said, pulling her close. "Tonight, I want you two myself." She laughed and kissed him, and they walked back to the house hand in hand, two souls who had found each other in the darkness and built something bright and lasting. Years became decades. The world changed around them, technology advancing, society shifting, but they remained constant. Partners and lovers and best friends, they traveled the world together, Gwendolyn seeing places she had only dreamed of as a human. They worked together to expand the sanctuary, to improve conditions for vampires throughout Britain and beyond. And on quiet evenings, they would return to the garden where it had all begun, where Gwendolyn had sworn never to wed again, and Alaric had quietly vowed to change her heart. "Did you ever imagine this?" Gwendolyn asked one such evening. They were dancing slowly under the stars, no music needed. "When you first heard my vow." "I hoped," Alaric admitted, "but I never dared to believe it could truly happen, that you would not only accept me, but choose to join me in this life." "Best decision I ever made," Gwendolyn said, "breaking that vow." "You did not break it," Alaric corrected gently. "You rewrote it. You chose partnership instead of prison, love instead of loneliness. You chose to be fully yourself and fully mine, and that is the most precious gift anyone has ever given me." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and smiled. She had been so certain that marriage meant losing herself, had sworn never to risk it again. But Alaric had shown her a different way, had proved that two people could come together and both be strengthened. They danced in the garden as they had done dozens of times before, as they would do hundreds of times more. Vampire and vampire, partners and equals, bound not by obligation or tradition, but by choice and love. And in the cottage at the edge of the estate, a light burned in the window, a new tenant, a new story beginning, perhaps another lost soul who would find healing in the peace of these grounds, perhaps another beginning. But that was a story for another night. Tonight belonged to Alaric and Gwendolyn, to the love they had built from loneliness and loss, to the future stretching bright before them. The roses bloomed eternal in their garden, and so did their love, growing stronger with each passing year. They had found what so many sought and so few discovered: true partnership, built on respect and trust and the fierce determination to honor each other above all else. Gwendolyn had vowed never to wed again. Alaric had vowed to change her heart, and together they had built something neither of them could have imagined alone: a love that would last through centuries, a partnership that honored both of them, a joy that made immortality worth living. The moon rose over the estate, bathing everything in silver light, and in the garden where it had all begun, two souls danced together, bound not by obligation but by love, not by possession but by choice, partners for all the long years ahead.